Hey guys, thank you for joining us again for another exciting episode of YOMO. This is the Year of Magical Learning podcast. So today we are on Reflection 297, and the book we want to learn from is A Very Punchable Face by a memoir by Colin Jost.
Yeah, Jost. Yeah, you don't know who Colin Jost is?
No,
Oh
not a
man,
clue.
Colin Jost is he's probably best known these days as Scarlett Johansson's husband. But you know who Scarlett Johansson is?
I do know her. I don't know her husband though.
So he's a here. I'll show you a photo of him. This is Colin Jost. This is the Very Punchable Face.
How is it a very punchable face?
It's a joke. He's like a very waspy white upper middle class. Like his persona is very much so like he's just a rich white dude. It's like a douchebag. Like that's kind of like when you see him and the way that he acts and behaves, he's not like that. He's just what people think of him when they see him is just some rich white dude. There's a very punchable face. He's a guy that you just look at him and you're like, I could really punch that guy. He seems like a douchebag. Anyway, it's
Okay.
a joke. Obviously, he's a comedian. Colin Jost was the head writer for Saturday Night Live. Did you ever watch Saturday Night Live?
Sometimes.
Okay, yeah. So Colin was the head writer for SNL, and he still is. I think he's like the head writer, and he's also the Weekend Update host. So he's for the past I want to say it's probably been like 7-10 years or something like that he and Michael Che have been the Weekend Update. When they do the mock reporting in the middle of the SNL. So Colin is the anchor, one of the anchors for SNL and the Weekend Update desk. And he's also the head writer for SNL as well. So he's a comedian, and he somehow married Scarlett Johansson. I have no idea how that happened.
Funny guy.
Yeah, it must be a really funny guy. Yeah. Anyway, so this book is it's a memoir. It's about Colin Jost's life, right? So this is another book that my wife and I did. I think we finally hit our stride together. I think we found our sweet spot, because you like Seth Rogen and Trevor Noah's book, and what are the other ones? I wrote them down in here. Shonda Rhimes' book, and now Colin Jost's book, and another one for this lady named Phoebe Robinson. I think we hit our stride with like books that we like can kind of cruise to. Was Comedian Memoirs. She hates nonfiction books, like hates it. A couple of times she was like, I think she actually recommended we read The Hidden Life of Trees. She was like, I heard from some people it's a really good book, and she was like, I don't know, I'm skeptical. And I'm like, oh my God, The Hidden Life of Trees, that sounds great, let's do it. An hour into that audiobook, she was snoozing, her brain was just off at work world, and I'm in there going, oh my God, trees have skin, their bark is like skin and they can feel stuff. I'm just way more into it than she is. So we tried to flip it, and we were like, okay, fine. My wife loves fiction books and things like that. She does like nonfiction around stuff that she likes, which is usually around racial diversity and inclusion and stuff that I don't mind. I mean, we've done a few of these books together like that, but even those, I don't think she really gets into them because she just doesn't like nonfiction. It just bores her, like listening to science and stuff like that. She just can't get into it for whatever reason. So we've tried fiction books, and I get bored, like out of my mind by fiction books. I get so lost with fiction books, man. I'm like, what's the story? Like, what are we doing here? What like somebody, like, I'll just go watch a movie or some bullshit. Like, why do I need to sit here and listen to some, 10 hours of somebody telling me, like the book In the Name of the Rose, one by, that was like a 21-hour audio book or whatever for like a bunch of monks in an Italian monastery. Like barely anything happened. I think back to that book and I'm like, man, that was such a waste of time, or like The Song of Achilles or 100 Years of Solitude. I mean, these are some of the fiction books that had come to mind that I've read on this journey, and all of them are like, oh my God. Like it was
you keep asking yourself, is there a point to this?
No, it felt like I was like running up a hill. It felt like I was running up a hill for myself. So my wife and I, we picked a couple of fiction books initially to do. One of them was this book called The Lost Apothecary. And we both thought it sounded really interesting because I was like, oh, cool, apothecary stuff. Like, like it'll be about potions and brews and shit like that. And she likes fiction books. And we both absolutely hated this book. We finished it, but you never saw that come up on this journey because that is one of the only two books that I never wrote a reflection about because I hated it so much. I just hate fiction books. So we were in this debacle. We wanted to spend time with each other and we were enjoying spending time with each other doing these books, but like we couldn't find the right kinds of books. Luckily, I think we hit our sweet spot with Comedian Memoirs. They were funny, they were entertaining, they were pretty short. They're not like forever long. They were interesting and entertaining. They're just funny. Like, I mean, like it's always fun to laugh with comedians, listening to stories about their life because they're all pretty good writers too, So I think I know that was a really long-winded way to say like this is a book that my wife and I read together, but these memoirs, I think we really hit our stride with them. So for Colin Jost, though, this particular book, people always ask him, how he's in a pretty prestigious job, right? I mean, he's the head writer for SNL. I mean, if you're a comedy writer, that's like the pinnacle of being a comedy writer, right? You can't get much better than having an opportunity to write for a show like SNL, and it's an institution for comedy. And some of the best comedians that have ever lived, gone through that the Steve Martins and Martin Shorts and Will Ferrell's and Adam Sandler's, all these really famous comedians have done their stint and got their start at SNL. For Colin, that was the pinnacle of his career. He was like, man, I want to work at SNL, and got a shot really early on. He was the head writer for the Harvard Lampoon. You ever heard of that magazine? It's like the Harvard student magazine. It's called the Lampoon or whatever. It's like a satirical comedy kind of thing. It's like a old historical organization for them. And he ended up being the head writer there, and then he got a job at SNL, and he became pretty successful, right? At a really early age. And people would come up to him always, and they would ask him, like, what would be your best advice for someone that wants to become a professional comedy writer? And Colin's answer, I thought, was like just awesome. He goes, the truth is, he's like, find more people that love comedy as much as you do. And I was like, that was a really interesting answer, because Colin, in this whole book, he talked about how much he loved comedy his entire life and how much he loved writing about comedy. And he was like obsessed with it, right? But it wasn't until he started to be around other people that shared the same passion, for his comedy writing, that he really started to blossom in his own right with his own meaningful work output. And that was the biggest game changer for him. He said, it's just more fun that way. And we talk about this all the time. Meaningful work is incredible. Like when you find meaningful work, that's amazing. Like the love and work, right? We were talking about the past couple of weeks, like there's nothing better than getting into that flow state and just feeling that, like when I'm writing in the morning, or like when I'm, playing pickleball or tennis, or when I'm coaching people or something like that at work, or whatever I'm doing, right? Like there's nothing better than that feeling of just that pure like flow state feeling for yourself. But it's not sustainable enough, right? Like it's never going to be enough. And in order for you to ever actually make this meaningful work turn into something of value that the rest of the world can consume, you need other people to do it. And that's why one of our core values is don't do it alone. And I thought, I've heard this just so time and time again from all the different memoirs that I've read on this journey. It's the same story over and over again. Will Smith and DJ Jazzy Jeff, or Bono meeting Edge, or, Roger Federer and his wife, honestly, and some of their, it doesn't matter. I can go on and on with memoirs that I've read, and people, of their meaningful relationships that they developed along the way that really helped them to care and to get better and grow. Bottom line is, it's a necessity. There is no balanced life without both meaningful work and meaningful relationships. And not only that, it might be even more important. Meaningful work, I feel like, is pretty obtainable. You just always are going to love something, right? Like meaningful relationships and finding other people that really like what you do and can help you to enhance that might be a harder thing, I mean, this whole entire scenario. And if you can find that, and you could really, like, the sky's the limit when you live your values with other people that care about the same stuff, right? And they can challenge you and keep pushing you, and you guys can grow together. So this is a thank you to you and Amelia for this whole journey, right? I know for a fact, like, I would not be doing what I'm doing right now without you every single day, and without Amelia every single day, and without all the other people that all of our meaningful work has started to bring in. And, it's just not as fun either. Like, I mean, if I was doing this all by myself, I wouldn't. It's meaningful to a certain point and, to a certain extent, but like, that's not sustaining enough, right? Like, I think we as humans need that extra level of connection, right? And that's where the meaningful relationships are so important. It's not just one or the other, it's both. You have to have both in order for you to really find a balanced life that you're hoping to seek. So anyway, I'll pause there. Love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the balance between the yin and the yang, the meaningful work and meaningful relationship, it is one to make a whole. You cannot have just half of it. And a lot of time, this is kind of what you were saying reminds me of when you first starting this reflection that you just wrote, right? And so you think about how much meaningful, I mean, it's still meaningful to you when you write the reflection by yourself and having it. But compare that value of meaningful. How much meaningful is it with just writing the reflection and just keeping on your journal versus writing it and then have this YOMO and talking to somebody and learn more from it? I mean, I feel like it's a level 1 meaningful to a level 8 meaningful when you start to have somebody give you feedback. Okay, when you talk about reflection and you talk in a way that you are trying to explain it, not only for you to understand, but for someone else to understand, but also have the feedback from the other person's perspective, I understand, and also to ask you, additional questions and sometimes challenge you on that. So we also talk about when we understand something, right? There is a surface understanding versus a deep understanding of what it is that we mean when we say, hey, we don't want to train, people must stand, all these things. There is a deeper level. There's a bigger backstory to all these things that we talk about, and that constitute what it means to have meaningful relationship, fuel the fire of meaningful work. It actually catapult the level
Yep.
of meaningfulness of
Yes.
that kind of activity that you do. So, like you said, everyone has to have a Jesse Jeff, or at least one Jesse Jeff, because
Right.
right, and that's what I'm saying is I agree with you that life in general is like a team sport. You cannot play by yourself.
No one see you do anything anyway. What's the point? Like, great, like you throw it to nobody and nobody saw it. Like, it's like you
But the
always
thing
say
is,
this when it's like you have $1 billion.
even if you're the guy who's the quarterback and you throw in the football, but no one's catching it, isn't as thrilling as you threw it and this guy's on his stride and he caught
Right.
it, and that's it. Hey, I was better at it because right now I'm just hitting a stationary target.
Yep.
I don't know kind of feedback that, hey, what if in the real life it's a moving target? So this guy's running, and how fast he run? Can I judge this? Can I put the ball right in front of him for him to catch
Right.
in his stride? I mean, that is just multiple levels above just hitting a station target. So you imagine a guy throwing a football to a target. I mean, yeah, you love it, but you don't really love it. But if you
Yeah,
have
it's boring.
somebody to play with, it
Right.
actually takes to like massive level, just not even double, not even twice it up, but it's I'm talking about exponentially, increasing the meaningfulness
Yeah.
of that particular activity. So you look at how we as human, we need to have that connection. The meaningful relationship makes meaningful work so meaningful, and the
Yes.
meaningful work when you for to kind of borrow what you say today is find more people that love the same thing that you do, your reflection, the meaningful the meaningful work, right? When you find meaningful, and that is what attracts other people to you. Just like, that you are going to find people and they're going to find you, because that's what you say in your reflection is, you find more people that love the same thing you do because you doing it. Other people
Right.
are going to do the same thing. So basically, it attracts you to become this tribe, and that
Yep.
tribe becomes this meaningful relationship.
Mhm.
So that, like you say, it's a yin and yang. It has to be both. It cannot be separated. Like even if you love to write but no one reads it, think about it. If you love to write but
Sucks.
no one reads it, man, I mean, at least somebody reads it and appreciate it, and also give you feedback on it. It is much more fulfilling than to have written it
Right.
and no one sees it. And that's what I'm saying is, yes, there are certain things that align, but alignment with a relationship, it's just exponentially much,
It's the
much more.
compound. It's like an explosion, non-linear growth. Okay, so this writing project, I'll tell you what happens. Every single day when I sit down and I write and I finish a new book and I get my thoughts out and I work through thoughts in my head, I feel like I go like this after when I'm finally done. I go into a bit of a trance for like an hour, words start flowing, I get it all out of me. I think through a problem, or I think through, kind of rationalizing in my own head. I get it out on paper. And when I'm done and I feel purged, I'm kind of almost like, yes, that felt good. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's exactly always, I mean, that's the feeling that I feel like when I walk away. I'm like, all right, I'm like, I want to like high five Amelia or something like that, like in my head, right? Like, and it's like, yeah, okay, all right, let's go start the day, right? Well, to your point though, like if that's where it stopped, like I don't even remember my own writing. I mean, I've told you this many times, right? I don't remember many of these books, and I don't remember many of the lessons that I learned. It isn't until we go back through them and we have conversations about them that they start to, it takes me back into my memory palace to that moment, the feeling, the thoughts of what I learned, what I didn't learn, and then it sticks, right? It reminds me of that book, The Pilgrimage by Paulo Coelho, or whatever, the guy that wrote The Alchemist. I don't know if you remember that one that we did. It was a long, long time ago that we did this one. He went on that pilgrimage to Santiago or whatever, and he had this guide that was like guiding him along the way. Honestly, the guide had no idea what he was doing. He was processing his own journey, his original journey. When the guy took his own original journey, he didn't remember why we did what we did. It wasn't until he was doing that and teaching somebody else that he finally, like, he was like, this journey really wasn't for you, man. It was kind of for me. The point of when you share it with other people and when you have to go learn yourself and have a conversation about it and be challenged on stuff. And obviously you care about the same topics that I care about. So I'm not talking to somebody about pro level tennis when you've only played as a 5-year-old or something like that, right? Like, I mean, it's equals, that equally care about, that are equal in knowledge and equally can help each other to vet through ideas or the meaningful work, right?
Having a professional tennis play with a 10-year-old, I mean, it's not fun. I mean, same thing with
they both get worse
with the interests of the two person. If you and I have a different level of interest in the same subject, the conversation isn't that fun because you're gonna be bored by what I respond to you. Because it's just, hey, what are you thinking? Your logic isn't up there. You're not even challenging my mind at all, and my mind is like, I'm gonna shut down. So it's gonna be boring for you. Just like you go and play a 10-year-old right now in tennis or pickleball, you just completely
it'll make you quit. It'll make you want to quit. They'll both want to quit. That's the shitty part about non-meaningful relationships.
That's called alignment.
Right, exactly. Like if you and I weren't learning together and growing together and caring about the same stuff together, like, let's just say that there was somebody out there that maybe already has thought a company that's maybe way past where we are right now. I wouldn't want to hang out with them. I wouldn't want to talk about it because they would be bored and we'd be bored. Like, we're discovering together, we're learning together, we're growing together, right? Like, and we're doing things that we care about together. Like, that's the point of sharing meaningful work together, right? Like, and helping each other to grow. You're right. When you find that secret, like that little, the right level, the right feedback, the right sharing of meaningful work and meaningful relationships all coming together, like, the growth is like unstoppable almost.
You think about how a tornado or hurricane forms. Like, you imagine like having the hot air and the cold air kind of meet each other, right? So imagine you have more hot air, more powerful hot air than cold air. Would it create tornadoes? No. What happens? You have more cold air than hot air. Would it start? Now it has to have the right amount for them to start to form this twister.
Right.
It forces each other to grow and to spiral upward. And that's the same thing with me and you. It's like, if you were ahead of me in terms of your journey, then for you it's so boring to talk to a guy who's like, it's like a baby in terms of the information and the knowledge about self-development and what we want in our life, right? To me, it's not going to work because you're bored and I'm also bored because I have no idea what you're talking about. You keep spouting nonsense about some beavers you got a dam, right? And I say, well, okay, I'm trying to catch up. I don't know. So I'm like feel like I'm drowning with information, and you're like, I'm like dry up in my brain, and my brain doesn't want to stay awake because this guy is so boring. So even if we like the same thing, we're on the same journey, but we're in different phases of our life, it doesn't work either. That's why having a tribe, having the people that align with you, not only in the interest, but in the stage of where they are, is also important, because the yin and yang has many, many different factors and elements that need to be in the right place for it to work. But once you understand yourself about the kind of thing that makes you attract other people. I mean, people love comedy. They're going to say, well, I love comedy, but you love comedy in the same level that I do? Because imagine Colin talking to somebody who is completely famous, like really, really famous in their own right. Colin's going to have to find his own peers, his own tribe. Right. You're talking about Adam Sandler, you're talking about Steve Martin, and you're talking about Martin Short, right? These guys are legends, but Colin probably can go and interact with them, but they don't create that meaningful relationship like you would. Even though all of them like comedy,
level,
you're talking about
respect. You love the same stuff
versus somebody who is trying to get up there. So the relationship is different. But then if you get to the point where a person is also learning, is also at the same level and is trying to grow as well, the growth is what projects the other person, give them that foundation, that stepping stone to step. And then once he does that, just like how you get out of the well, when two persons stuck in the well, you just put your back together and just walk up the thing.
Is it just
because you push against the other person so that you can move up? He pushes against you to move up. So that's, to me, It's the compound effect of two persons relying on each other to create a stepping stone for the other person.
Agreed. Is it really just learning together about something you love, like that you both equally love? Is that the key? Because to your point, I can't learn with, Novak Djokovic right now. He's learned more in my life than I could at tennis, and I'm not going to help him. He can only help me, but honestly, he's not going to want to help me because, like, what's the point? He doesn't get anything out of that, right?
His interest is not there, so his brain is going to shut down and say, hey, it's not rewarding for me to keep doing this. He's going to say, well, I can't continue to teach you. So that's different, right? To me, one of the core need for a human is the discovery and exploration. That is something that everybody needs to have, because that creates this movement, right? This motion. Human has to be in motion because they have to go do that. And learning is just part of that core need. And so I think you're hitting on something I think is pretty accurate in terms of, if you have two person who is learning the things that align with them, I think that creates that meaningful relationship. Right?
Because learning
together.
Because it's one thing for me to learn. It's a whole other thing for me to learn with you and with Amelia. And then it's a whole other thing for us to then spread that. I think your football analogy of the quarterback and wide receiver was a great analogy, because here's what happens when a quarterback, and like I think of Marvin Harrison and Peyton Manning, right? Like they both came into the league together. They were very similar age. They were learning the NFL together. They learned how to play together. Like when those two started to connect and do what they were doing, special shit started to happen. When that special shit started to happen, fans started to want to see the output of their special shit. And then all of a sudden it becomes its own little self-fulfilling snowball effect situation. Then Peyton did it with Reggie Wayne, but it was a different situation with Reggie Wayne. Peyton was already a master and Reggie Wayne was like, trying to learn from the master. Like it didn't feel the same way.
But it isn't as fun for Peyton Manning, even though he can do that. But imagine that, Peyton Manning is Tennessee #1 draft, right? He comes out and there's no Marvin Harrison for him to pass to. Because the thing is, if you throw but no one catches it, what happened? And then if you have Marvin Harrison and have no Peyton Manning, so you can run fast and you be in open, but no one throws at you, right? Where do you think Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison would be if they weren't in the same, they weren't on the same team?
I don't know.
Because if you put Marvin Harrison on the Browns, right? You could be the greatest receiver, but you have no quarterback. By the time you're on open, your quarterback gets sacked.
Look at Odell Beckham and Baker Mayfield. They were awful together. Odell already knew everything. Baker didn't know shit, and they didn't gel together. And what they produced was garbage. It wasn't something that other people wanted to see.
And you see the result, right? The result it's very mediocre. It's probably not very good, right? As far as the potential for each of these two persons is great. But the result is very mediocre. You're talking about Mayfield and Odell Beckham. These guys, right, they could be good on their own, but when they don't not in unison, there's no result. But also there's the second layer to that. If you somehow both good, but one is above the other, because I said Peyton Manning and Richie Wayne. Richie Wayne is improving rapidly because of Peyton Manning's ability to place the ball right where Richie Wayne needs to be. And Richie Wayne learns and he is in growing fast. But Peyton Manning isn't growing because he's already because you're talking about the gap is so large that it isn't as fun for Peyton Manning, because for him he needs and he desires the ability to grow, but he's not growing because he still has to wait for Reggie Wayne to catch up. So you think about that second layer as well. His career, if you think about his career, because Peyton Manning is okay with Reggie Wayne because he already attained that level already with Marvin Harrison, right? And so for him, he said, well, yeah, I gotta be the leader here, and I'm gonna try to mentor the young kids and whatever. And so to Peyton Manning, it's a different set of learning at that point. It's not about I'm improving myself as a quarterback, right? He's teaching, so that's a different level of learning.
It's not as fun,
but it's not as the most fun is learning to do what it is that you are doing for yourself. If you guys are on the same level, that is the most fun you will have, and that's going to be the most fulfilling in terms of.
It's never ending fun. The tennis challenge the past 2 months, right? I've been able to share with you what I've learned through that, But like the truth is, if I was just doing this on my own and no one ever saw this, and unless my tennis buddies were doing it with me, I don't know how this is sustainable, like, because it's like nobody cares other than me. And at a certain point in time, like I know that there's a deeper why in me now at this point in time where there's always somebody that's going to care, and that is Amelia, right? Like you allow me to do a lot of, you humor me with a lot of me, like, blab on and on and on about, deliberate practice.
Well, it is
like
all humor because
I know, because you are getting nuggets out of it. Like,
it's still like, yes, you are doing the tennis challenge, but the lessons that you learn, it is valuable to me as well, in terms of, okay, I know about how to practice, how to train somebody, but I don't know. But what you did with your challenge, and we both discovered this, which is why it's fun to talk about. We discovered this, hey, if we deliberately practice, it's like, okay, we're doing this kung fu where we have this master that punch, that's 1,000 punch, simple basic punches. That's how you train effort. Okay, that reaffirms another connections in my brain, in my neurons, about, okay, I know how to train myself. I know how to get myself to the point where I can self-reflect and critique my own and get to the point where I can grow. And so that, to me, it is valuable. That's important. So even though it's tennis, and I don't play tennis, the lesson that we learn from the lesson can be transferred to other places. We're talking about anything, because it's talking about improving yourself, the mastery of things that is aligning with who you are, whether that's coding, whether that's gardening, whether that's running some kind of a business or whatever. It's still relevant to what we're saying. And so that creates this engagement. And we both learn, right? Yes, you learn something in tennis, but you and I, on this podcast, in this hour, you and I both learn about the side of what life is supposed to be, what life we need to live. How do we conduct ourselves? How do we create the purpose for ourselves? That you and me are on the same level, when we both learn at the same time, and we both growing at the same rate. Versus somebody is okay, I'm telling you all this thing, but you're not telling me shit, because I mean, I know all the things that you're gonna come out of your mouth. Like, it's not as fun for you, because if I mean, that's the thing is, if somebody is above some other level, you either have to mentor that person.
Yeah, right. If I was telling Novak Djokovic my deliberate practice stuff, he'd be like, no shit, dipshit. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been doing this since I was 8 years old, man? Like, what are you talking about?
It didn't fire his neurons in his head either. And he said, oh, yeah, sure.
What you just said about firing neurons, like, I think that's the other thing. I really do think it's about learning together. Like, I think we're both building different neural pathways together, collectively. It's like a joined neural pathway. It's like a neural pathway that extends out of your own minds, because we're both connecting it, like learning together, right? And when I mean,
you just imagine you and I get stuck in a well, okay, and you and I were to climb out of the well. We put our backs together and we push our feet against the wall of the well, and we climb up. So imagine if you were a step ahead of me and I'm a step behind you. If I'm a step ahead of you and you step behind me, would it work? No, it doesn't work, right? So I mean, it's not a straight analogy, but you can see, you can understand why it's important.
You got to go together
to be on the same level when you're trying to learn something, when to accomplish a certain task. And that, to me, is what I can simplify it to. Yes, it's more dynamic than that. It has more variables to it, but to understand the basic level first before we go to the advanced complex level, we have to kind of like make an analogy to what we can understand now, to say, well, that's how things work for now, and then later on we could probably add more elements to it, more variables to it, and it still be about process, the formalizing result we need to learn from. But I think it's to me, that's a key. Today, I, like you and I were learning one more
step up,
important life lesson, right? Which is you have to find the people that love the same thing, but it's also
on the same level,
learning together.
Yes. I mean, like, I was about ready to say, like, the more I just thought about what we've been talking about, Colin Jost even owned book. Like, I think if we shared this thought with him, I think he would totally agree, because when he said this was about him learning when he joined the Harvard Lampoon, the newspaper, right? Like this is what really catapulted him into a better comedic writer because he was around a bunch of other group of young kids that also were trying to figure out how to be better comedic writers. They were all on the same level trying to help each other, right? Then he goes to SNL as a really young writer, very early on with a lot of other really young writers that are also similar to him, and they're all trying to figure out how to grow and get better at it, right? So he was always growing with his peers to the whole conversation that we've been having. I think this is a really important point. If Colin Jost went back to go live at the Lampoon newspaper, because the writers of the Lampoon newspaper actually live in this castle or something like that. It's called like the Harvard Castle, the Lampoon. So it's like this famous little castle thing or whatever. So like most of these writers like live in this fucking thing, right? Like they actually like live in this room. This is like where they're like the Harvard Lampoon building is, and this is where the writing all goes on, and they all hang out there all day long. They have a little secret society. Anyway, what I was getting at is these people are immersing themselves in the Harvard Lampoon society. They all were young and ambitious and growing and learning together. If Colin were to go back to that same building right now as a 37-year-old, the senior writer at SNL, and was forced to go do what he did again at the Harvard Lampoon, he'd be like, I don't want to do this. This isn't fun for me. I've done this. I lived this. I grew this. I'm not getting the same experience. Everybody else there would be like, oh my God, I get to learn from Colin Jost. So teach me everything, Colin. And he'd be like, all right, well, I guess I can teach you. And there's value in teaching. Like teaching is its own rewarding
it's different,
thing.
But I think it's the most rewarding. It's still rewarding to teach somebody, but because you learn on your own, but it's not as fun as learning and telling other people what you learn. Because you think about
fun is learning together with other people. Like, I mean, it's
learning together. That's the thing is when you teach, you do learn, but it's learning for yourself. But unless you have other teachers around you, right, it isn't as fun because let's say you and I become both teachers, right? Eventually we're gonna have to go and mentor people like Blake again, right? Blake is completely stuck at the ground level, and we're already like many miles above him, and so you go back to him and say, I have learned this over the last 3 years with True, right? And you are teaching him. So you are telling him everything that you and I are talking about, but your brain is like, okay, I'm teaching him, but I've learned a new technique how to teach him. But then you can't share with him because he wouldn't understand what you're saying. You have to come share with me.
It's lonely. You're right.
And I have to also go teach somebody and also say, yeah, you did that. Okay, let me try that over here with maybe Amber or somebody else. That's what I'm saying is it's somebody that is your confidant, more confident, and you learn together. So even if you are teaching, there is reward in itself in teaching, but the most reward comes from having the person right next to you that is on the same level and it's learning, and you can discuss it and you can do this sounding board back and forth with that person to say, well, but that's what I'm saying is you and I can go, okay, we're going to have to go and mentor somebody in their core values quest, right? The university.
I do this every day. Like I do this every day with my team. I think you were so spot on with this.
To me, and you talk to me about what you did to mentor them, right? You don't tell them, hey, this is how I mentor you. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't intrinsically rewarding to watch them grow, going back to like Peyton Manning, Reggie Wade, like I'm sure he loved watching Reggie develop into a great wide receiver, right? And knowing that he had a big impact on that. That was rewarding in that. But he and Marvin Harrison, like you said, like they did it together. They learned together how to be consummate pros in the NFL, achieve great heights. So like it's probably a completely different relationship between the two. But the teaching aspect, this is what I do every day with the Club and Elite program, right? And there's some times when I'm like, I got to say this again to you guys. I'm tired of saying the same thing over and over again of focus on your values. This is first things first. Don't let shit get in the way. I'm trying to always go back to the fundamentals with them. And that's okay. That's what teaching is. But it's not rewarding for me to say this stuff to them.
It's nothing new. You desire newness, desire discovery. And that's without discovery, your brain starts to slow down and maybe it shuts down altogether. That's why when you teach somebody, there is some newness in it, but it's not as much newness. It is a tiny bit. So you're talking about a level 1 versus a level 8 in terms of meaningful. That's why to go teach somebody on a different level is not as fulfilling because you're leaving a lot of room. It's just not as, you're not optimizing your time and growth. But if you and I were together on the same level, that's why, because when you and I get together, we are basically exactly at the same place. We know that what we have right now isn't working. We just say, hey, I need to find something new. And you also say, I need to figure out how to rebuild Amelia Tower, right? And so we are at the same stage, and you don't know what you don't know shit, and I don't know shit, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so we
We
say,
just, we just we just
okay,
started going, you know.
they would know a little bit, right?
Right,
Not, but still a little bit. So
right.
eventually it gets on, but that's what fuels our growth, because just like I said in the well, you have to push against me for me to climb up, and I
Yep,
have to push against you for you to climb up, because
yep,
otherwise there's no support for
right.
you to step up against that
Yep.
wall. And so to me, this to me is a revelation.
I
And
agree. I think this is a really unique lesson. This is why we do this. This is not what I said in this reflection.
this is what we
Like,
call wisdom. This is what we call
right, right,
insight,
yeah,
because
right,
we are taking information, and eventually our brains start to click. Because I
right,
was talking and say, okay, you mean like if we learn together? And then I say, well, okay, I'm picking up on it, and then I
right,
start feeding you. And then so that's the thing is you're gonna get a spark of idea, and then I start looking at it, and I start pushing it, and you start pushing it, and eventually it creates this compound effect, and it
right.
comes out. And now I am pretty convinced that that's is a great way
Yep.
to kind of rearrange your environment to get the most out of your life.
I mean, it's honestly, when we start to make ventures in Clubany, like when we're pairing up founders and stuff like that, or like when we're advising
Mm.
on groups that are forming, we should make sure that they're in a common starting place in life together, so they can learn together. They got to equally love what they're about to go down the road, but also be started at the same place. You can't have somebody that's a 60-year-old CEO.
You can't have a mismatch, right?
Right.
It creates the
Doesn't work.
the gap, right? It doesn't work when you have that gap.
Like DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince are a perfect example. They were in high school and they both loved hip hop. They both separately were obsessed with certain aspects of hip hop. They happened to unite together. If Will Smith right now met Jazzy Jeff as a high school kid, he'd be like, I'm not fucking talking to you, bro. It's the time and space and certain things. Like, you don't get Jazzy Jeff without Fresh Prince at the same time starting place with a similar learning trajectory to want to grow together, but also being obsessed at the same time with the same stuff that they both love. Like, this is a really important point of all this stuff. And I mean, it's I think Colin hit the nail on the head, but I think he was missing a big point of his own trajectory. He wasn't learning, he wasn't finding other, because there's plenty of other people that love comedy. He could have walked into a room with Steve Martin and Martin Short, and they would have been like, get the fuck out
Charlie
of here, little
Chaplin,
guy.
right?
Right,
Get him to
right,
Charlie Chaplin.
right,
Well,
right.
they both love comedy, but they don't jive together.
They would, like Nassim Taleb, if we walked into the room and started want to talk about unpredictability,
And he's gonna sit there and go,
he'd be, oh my God, guys, fuck
yeah.
this. Like, I don't want to talk to you guys. Like, now if you want to go explore your own shit, like go explore your own shit, right? But like, good Lord, I'm not gonna sit here and waste my time with you dumbasses, like, and I would be, that's totally fair. That's fine. Like, Nassim Taleb would not be somebody that we would want to start a meaningful relationship with around our meaningful work projects that we wanted to do together, because he's already doing this, and he probably already has his own meaningful, I'm sure he has his own meaningful relationships around his meaningful work that he's growing up with, throughout the whole entire time, where they've been learning together. Now they're probably still learning together, right? But like, I fundamentally think that you hit on a really important point. You got to go together. Like, you got to be at the same level, and you got to go together, and you both have to love it equally. Like, I mean, like that's I think that these are fundamentals of,
and you also have to
this.
progress at the same level. So
Right.
imagine, go back to the well analogy again. I cannot go faster than you, right? When we are forcing each other, our backs against each other to get that support, I can't go faster than you, and you can go faster than me, because that doesn't work either. So the growth, the learning, and the growth has to be very,
Step by
very
step.
aligned, right? It's a
Right.
step by step. Because
Right.
you imagine how, if Marvin Harrison versus Peyton Manning, and Peyton Manning is getting way, way better, way, way faster than Marvin Harrison. Well, it doesn't work, right?
This is
Because
kind of,
I mean, if Marvin Harrison isn't catching the ball, Peyton Manning isn't going to progress either, and vice versa.
This is really funny you just said that, because my pickleball partner, I'm starting to feel this with my pickleball partner. No, I'm not saying in a bad way. I love him as a human being, right? But like,
right. But
I think our skill levels are starting to spread too far.
Yeah, we have identified the elements, and when we look at it, say, well, it's fun, but it's not as fun if with this person or that person. Because the thing is, Dustin isn't a tennis player.
Right. I was actually thinking this yesterday. Ryan and I should probably start playing pickleball together, because we actually have a great doubles pairing. Like, I think we would actually, like, learning together a game that we both can probably, like, sometimes I tell Dustin things where I'm like, explaining him tennis strategy and thoughts, where he's like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I don't want to teach Dustin, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
because for
Ryan
Dustin,
would,
you have to give him the information. As for Ryan, he can see it, he can ask the question, and it's like it creates this novelty in your head, and it's like you engage. You say, well, yeah, of course, yeah, right.
and just
Because
to be crystal
otherwise,
clear,
you're
like
leading
Dustin
somebody.
is
No,
and
you're not
is working
engaged.
hard.
Engaged because thing it's to
Right.
you, it's commonplace.
That's true. I mean, that
Right?
it's funny that we're even talking about this because this is not even in my mind. I mean, because I'm still just learning myself and growing, and I'm having fun. Like Dustin and I are having fun.
But
We're
you're
gonna continue to
growing
play
at a
tournaments.
faster level than Dustin is because
Right.
you have
Yes.
the foundation of a tennis player, a tennis background for 30-something years, right? That gives you a more accelerant on your growth, and your growth isn't, par with Dustin. And so, like I say, a two-person well, if somebody's going faster than other, somebody's gonna fall, and both are gonna fall just because
You're both gonna fall. Right. It is interesting. I think this is a really okay. I got a lot to say on this one.
We have two revelations back to back from 290 to 96, and then 297 have two revelations back to back.
You know what's hilarious about this whole thing is it's from a fucking book called A Very Punchable Face. Like, we're talking about stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with A Very Punchable Face, a memoir by Colin Jost.
It's like 3 years of information that you pump into this AI brain and that AI brain, and it gets to the point where it have enough pieces of information. Now it's trying to form this information, and this thing is basically like a grain of sand that tips the scale.
Right.
Oh yeah. Because yesterday we had one, not yesterday, but the previous episode we had the revelation, and now today we have another revelation, which I think this is huge inside of what company needs to people.
We got to be very strategic with helping to form meaningful relationships, right? Like, be a gardener, not a Moses, right? So this is what was the one before this? The 1 minute.
The 1 minute manager, right?
That was a fun one.
So we're talking about deliberate practice, and what we talk about is
that wasn't a podcast, Drew. That was just us shooting the shit on one of the days. That was yesterday. We were just shooting the shit because we didn't actually do a book on that one. That was just like top of mind, and we just started talking about it. It wasn't even a reflection, but I agree with you. That was a revelatory conversation.
I think it's always a reflection when we talk, but it just happens to then have a book.
Right. Yeah, one of them happens to have like a topic in a book that we're talking about.
But that revelation, I think it is super important to understand and know as well, because I think, in order for us to grow at a pace where we become self-mastery, that is something we need to know how to communicate with our elephant, the inner elephant, right? And I think it's warrant a reiteration.
It's fascinating. Talk about red threads, right? Pulling a red thread out of a.
That's the thing is people don't know what you're talking about when you talk about red threads.
But this, I mean,
it's like people can say.
This is exactly what we've been talking about. We understand it together, and you understand what I just said when I said we pulled a red thread out of a very punchable face.
I exactly know what you mean. But at the same time, it's just between me and you, and that's why our conversation is interesting. And people is not gonna find our conversation interesting until they're actually going through the journey from the beginning. So they can't just jump into 297 and say, "Well, I understand what this guy's saying," because he keeps saying the elephant. What the fuck is an elephant?
Right. We've kind of stopped saying a beaver must dam. Have you noticed that?
In this episode.
Well, I know, but I mean, it used to be
because we moved on to the moment. Like I told you, like
foundational
we're making an analogy until you understand what we mean. Because right now we're talking about meaningful relationship. We're talking about gotta be who you gotta be. It's like, well, what does that mean when you say you gotta be who you gotta be? Who's it supposed to be? It's like, what the hell does that mean?
Right.
I tell somebody, like, imagine that you and I haven't met, and I just tell you, you gotta be who you gotta be. What the hell does that mean? We're talking about a beaver must stand. We give him an analogy of a beaver has a characteristic that is suited to be in the water and blah 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 and all that. That's a backstory. And because yes, it's not like, okay, you're a beaver. Yeah, you're 100 times more complex than a beaver. But it's a foundation for us to understand. And once we establish that beaver, and over time we create enough, I guess, repetition for our elephant to understand what we mean, and we moved on to it. Now we keep saying, meaningful relationship, meaningful work. We're talking about the environment. We're talking about do you, be you. Right? That's something that you cannot understand until you have gone through the beaver must stand kind of phase, right? Because if I say be you, I mean, everybody's saying be you, but
Yeah,
what does
exactly.
that mean to
Yeah.
anyone? Because I heard it many, many times before, but
Of
I
course,
don't
yeah.
know
Do what you
what
love. No
people
drag.
keep saying. You just gotta be yourself. It sounds great, but I have no idea how to do that.
Right,
I mean,
right.
like I told you yesterday, if I tell you E equal MC squared, well, yeah, what does that mean? Right? Right?
Right.
How do I multiply mass and square the speed of light and multiply the mass? How do I even do that?
I was talking to one of my employees,
Mhm.
one of our club members the other day, and we were having a one-on-one and we were talking about something, and it ended up being talking about some of these topics that we talk about, right? I was like, do you know, after your magical learning journey, like, we were talking about simplicity and being, simplifying things. I was like, do you know what the 4-word synopsis, all of 365 books and 365 reflections and 100 pages of writing now. I'm on 398. I just finished 397, and it's 506 pages of writing, 300 podcast recordings, almost 360 books or whatever that I've read. You know what that sums up to for me? And they're like, I don't know, what is it? I'm actually curious to learn. I was like, it's focus on your values. And they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense.
That makes sense to you.
Like it makes sense to me. Like, I understand.
Yeah.
And exactly what I mean by that. Like, when all else fails, when you feel like you're lost, just go focus on your values.
I mean, how do I study?
How do I get to Carnegie Hall? Practice.
You want to be a good football player? Go practice.
Yeah, go throw the football. You want to be a good tennis player? Go hit a bunch of tennis balls.
That's what I'm saying. It's not simple.
It's not at all. Like, flying way over the top of somebody's head. Those 4 words to me mean 300 books and 500 pages of writing, countless hours of talking to you, like, all go into that, right? It's like an atomic element. Like, there's so much compact into that little fucking, knowledge of the universe is in a little atom, right?
You zoom out of the universe, and this galaxy becomes a tiny little dot, right? And then when you zoom in, it's like, boom, a bunch of stuff. I was like, oh shit.
Exactly.
No, that's what you mean. Yeah.
All right, I think we should put a pin on this one, because I want to leave on I feel good on this one. I feel like we really made some progress on this conversation, and in the past couple of days, actually, just in general. So the question we can leave with you all is, that is a very punchable face, by the way. I mean, like, look at him. Like, it is a very punchable face.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never hit a single person in my life, but like, I feel like he's somebody you would want to punch. I agree. That's a very good title. All right. Question is, are you seeking out others that care about what you care about? Start together, grow together, learn together. And I think you and I need to really put our thinking hats on for clubbing stuff. When we bring in our first real class of clubbing members, I think we should be looking for these characteristics of people that are starting at a similar place, care about similar stuff, and then bring them and make sure that they can do the quest, obviously. But like, if we do that at the beginning of this cultural building experiment, I think that's going to be really important, because if we just brought in, like, let's just say a class of 5 people that were all in different ways of life and different areas of life and cared about different things, like, they might collide together. But like, I think we should strategically do this.
Yeah, we're going to be selectively choosing a tribe.
Yes.
Right. We're selectively building a tribe by choosing the right individual that fits in that tribe. So they have to have the similar, phases of their life. Their core values must align for them to have somebody, at least have a Jazzy Jeff.
Right.
You can't just bring somebody else and be a lone wolf, regardless if they like.
Like, we could just pick 5 tennis players that are like 16 years old and love tennis and throw them. That's what they do. Like Bolletary Academy and like all these academies. They bring these kids together that in theory love tennis, and they throw them all into an area and they learn together. They just help each other, and they all of a sudden, boom, when they're 16, like, they become pro tennis players. And you're like, how did you guys get that good?
I mean, you can look at Twitch and how Twitch begins. It's just like, hey, these guys love to play games.
We just need to find an area of something, of people that love movies or something like that, or people that love theater or whatever. I don't fucking care. Like, people that love writing.
It could be anything.
Anything.
I guarantee you anything, because people think that, hey, you have to go into a traditional school or vocations to get, hey, I need to do something that I know provides value. Like, oh, I'm going to build something, I'm going to manufacture something, I'm going to draw up something. It doesn't have to be like that. You have to look at the creativeness of the people. Like, you like wine. You like to drink. You drink all day. How do you make money out of that? You think about it. They think that is not possible, so they discard them. And they never ever looked at money. They never evaluate whether that has any kind of value to people. But now today, you have people who learn how to make wine, because people understand how do I make the right wine for you to drink if you don't know? So you have to understand all of that to be a great winemaker. You can't have a great meal if you don't know what wine to pair up with. So you need sommelier. So you say, hey, if you're eating this steak, you need this one. You're eating this pasta you with seafood, you need this one. It enhances the experiences, and people find value in them. So you think about those people. Say, hey, if before any of these have come to be, you see, hey, this guy, he's a drunk. What would he do with what value would you provide to society? You think about it, right? Looking back, it's easy. Now we say, hey, there's people who make wine and all that. And so that's what
he's a drunk.
you believe.
Oh yeah.
Every person's uniqueness has a value to somebody.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think that this is a huge put a pin on it conversation for when we do start our any class that we bring in Club. Like every class that we bring in together, we need to be looking for commonalities and starting places of life. So the passion for what they're doing has to be there. We can bring the consistency and the values and help them to discover themselves in a process around that, right? And we can give them the safety, the security, and all that other stuff. But I think it's really important that they're all the same starting place, that they can learn together. And if we're going to make this thing work where they're just rapidly evolving together and creating things that are incredible value for other people, they all need to be learning together. We're not just going to procure, a CEO of a company isn't going to want to be in Clubany. They may become CEOs in Clubany, but a CEO isn't going to go I'm going to go back to start over, and just wander around or whatever. I already know what I'm fucking doing. And right or wrong.
You can, but it's not that.
There's a bunch of other CEOs who were just like them that started out.
No. CEOs are somebody who's already attained the highest level. A lot of CEOs, they say, well, I fucking hate this job. I'm going to go to something else, right? Somebody say, hey, I become CEO, now I'm retired. Now I want to do the thing that I want to do, which is I want to go make soap.
All right,
right?
That's fair.
And that CEO, he will get great with somebody who is looking to make soap, right? And Blake isn't going to be the right fit because even though Blake loves soap, making soap, but the CEO, his experience in soap making is zero. You find somebody who loves making soap, it's also at zero. You can put those two together. So to me, that's alignment.
That's fair.
That's the match. It's not to say that you being a CEO to come in and do his job as a CEO. Yeah, that's not going to work. I agree with that. Right. But if you say, hey, I don't like this, you look at Ken Jeong, right? He's a doctor. He say, hey, I don't like my job. I want to be a comedian. He goes, he starts at a low level. So whoever starts at a low level, whether this guy is an 18-year-old and this guy is a doctor, he's at the same level because he can learn the same way.
It's the same starting point. It doesn't matter age group, That's a very fair point. You're right. All right. We are done. I'm sure we could talk about this for another 2 hours, but we are wrapping it up for the night. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow for another fun, exciting conversation.
Okay. See you next time.